All right, thank you for staying with the Monday Report. Let's continue this conversation. I see some of your feedback here. Brian King says, very much agree that children constitute a large percentage of Kenyan population, yet they are represented by less than 5 children, all from the cities. What about the children in the coastal area or the northern area? All right. Ted Munovi says, which is one of the protocols that to our country's energy strategic interest has been properly been put up? Which one? Okay. That's a conversation that Ted is asking here. He says that we were at COP28. What is the one thing we have achieved as a country since the first COP meeting? All right. Which is a protocol that has been fully implemented in our country's energy strategic interest. Okay. Let me bring in Tarus on this. And Tarus, as we speak right now, more than 154 lives have been lost. More than 37 counties are inundated in water right now, floods. Has there been any progress made when it comes to the loss and damage policy that was pronounced in COP27?
Thank you very much, Trevor, for that question. Like I said, the proper negotiation has started. Of course, the position of Africa, including Kenya, has been that we need that fund operationalized as early as yesterday. So we are hopeful that as the discussions touching on the structure and the financing part progresses, we are hopeful that we should be able to have a next concrete step on how that loss and damage is going to be financed and more so kick in to be able to support disadvantaged countries, especially in Africa and other parts of the world where they need a lot of resources to adapt to the ravages of climate change. So far, of course, the indication is that there are a little bit of divergent views from some parties to the process. But of course, with the intense negotiation, we are hopeful that we would emerge with a victorious decision on how that particular issue of loss and damage is going to be addressed. Thank you.
Yeah, Tarus, I know you mentioned that there's a lot of negotiations still ongoing, and you said one of the issues that they're trying to come up with is Africa to speak in one voice. But have you seen some of the agenda of the Africa Climate Summit being put up for discussion? Was the Nairobi Declaration part of the considerations there, or are they just sidelined?
Thank you. If you recall, part of the closing balance of the SES declaration was that this particular declaration is going to inform or contribute significantly to COP28 discussions and beyond. So I would say part of the backbone of the discussion, especially those that are being proposed by Africa, has drawn heavily on what was decided here in Nairobi. We are hopeful that we would be able to push through all those issues that was declared here in Nairobi. But I say that it's still too early in the game to be able to know ultimately what are those issues that we raised and agreed in Nairobi are going to finally find itself as a decision at the global level. But like it was decided by the leadership then, it's been the blueprint of the discussions by the various nations within Africa, Kenya being included, because normally at this level, yes, you negotiate as a party, but most of the time we coalesce our efforts around a group calling itself African Group of Negotiators and G77, bringing together a total of 77 countries into the table for the argument to be stronger and more so be able to convince the other parties that are subscribing to either the processes we're engaging in, be it the COP. We are almost 192 countries, the Kyoto Protocol, I think 120, Paris Agreement 196. So you would see the maths that you need to have on your side for an agenda to finally find itself as part of the decision text while this process comes to its culmination. But Trevor, I must say that there are a lot of efforts being put both at the country level and also at the African level, to be able to see through that the raft of declarations that we arrived at all the way. I think, if I recall, there were almost 63 issues that we raised, and we're hopeful that we should be able to come up with quite a number of them. Thank you.
Okay. Jennifer, having heard how that ecosystem works, I know your interest is focused on the children, but should we be aiming at involving them at policy level or at the action level? For example, Kenya now is looking to plant 15 billion trees in 10 years. Should we then involve them at that tail end or at the policy level? Because there seems to be a lot of complexities there.
Trevor, that's the assumption a lot of people have, that children don't have a say or they don't have an opinion when it comes to policy work. But you know, policy informs action. If children are not involved at the policy level, their ideas, their opinions are not going to be included in the action, okay? And some of the actions that, most of the actions that are going to be, let me call it adultistic actions that are going to be implemented probably are not from a children's perspective, okay? So for me, what I say, and I have worked with children, I've seen it from the policy level. Ask them, what do you want? Okay, in this, in the loss and damage conversation. Okay, what do you want to see in the financing? What do we want to see? I have some colleagues right now in Dubai, and they are pushing that we have children negotiators. We have a group of, they don't have to be African, but we have children negotiators, children who are negotiating for children to have their children ideas in the room. Okay, so that we have ideas of children in those declarations. Okay, we saw it work during the African Climate Summit, where children pushed their agenda and it was included in the declaration for the African Climate Summit. So it's not possible, it's not impossible for it to be included, because policy does inform action. Okay, so if children are left out in their policy work, why involve them when you've already made a decision and you're telling them to come and rubber stamp what you've already decided, and they're not part of it. So it is like telling Trevor, today, put on a white shirt, okay? And then you put on and then say, oh, you're looking nice. But did you ask you, Trevor, do you really want to put on a white shirt today? Or do you want a pink shirt because you look better in pink? So it's good to ask Jen, what do you want? What do you want on your to be included in the policy work? Okay. Thank you.
All right. And Tobias, let me bring you back on the same conversation around that. The plan has always been to put nature, people's lives and livelihoods at the center of climate conversation. Has the world been able to achieve that? And what is the best way of ensuring that people understand this conversation? I know you're in the communication space. How furthermore can you break it down for the common mwananchi to understand and take action in their own little capacities?
Thank you, Trevor. You've put it succinctly that how do we break it down? And that the onus falls on us in the communication space and the media, led by you and the entire ecosystem. For a very long time, the conversation around climate change has been perceived as this elitist UN boardroom kind of issue, you know, that is, some people have even called it far-fetched. Some people have called it a scam, you know, just because the conversation has been based on, you know, complex issues in jargon and technical terms. But climate change in itself is not even the story. It is the context. It is the context in which so many things happen. It affects health. It affects, you know, agriculture. It affects how we do our trade. It affects so many different ecosystems. And the shift we need to make is to do narratives of change. How do we break down the technical, you know, negotiations and all that to what is actually going to apply to the common mwananchi, to my grandmother, your grandmother back at home, to something that they can understand. It is said that people know that climate change is a big issue, but they have other more important things, you know. That is because we have not drawn a nexus between the things that matter to them and climate change. So what we need to do is to break it down. How does this affect our food production systems? Because it does. How do these impacts affect the health systems? Because it does. You know, how does this affect how we conduct tourism, how we conduct trade? And climate change is not just about, you know, the graphic imageries that we share of burning earth and scorching earth and all that. There's so much more to it than that. And we can also shift that narrative to the action that different players are taking to address climate change, whether it's on mitigation or it's on adaptation. We've seen, for example, what different organizations in the country is doing, like the Kenya Climate Innovation Center, supporting different enterprises in the ecosystem to build resilience, to come up with different innovative business ideas that address climate change. And we've seen quite a number of youth, quite a number of women taking action in that space, telling such stories, breaking it to a level that people will understand, because when you talk about people's health, they will pay attention.
Yeah.
When you talk about people's children and their future, they will pay attention. When you talk about, exploiting the resources that we have in a way that does not compromise the future generations' ability to do so, then people understand that. So it's about breaking down the complexities and talking about the different facets of this conversation that affect people's daily lives. And it's also about, communicators and the media landscape breaking down these technical terms and not just talking about carbon emissions and the melting of ice, but bringing it closer home and putting a human face to this conversation, humanizing it and telling narratives of, the incredible action that people are taking in this regard. Just some few weeks ago, the Ministry of Environment and the Kenya Climate Innovation Center relaunched the 4K clubs in the country with an intention of ensuring that school-going children at a very young age, get socialized and get to know the importance of conserving nature, at that very tender age, because we have to start with the value system. So that tells you that when we decentralize the conversation on climate change and not just make it a technical conversation, then it makes it easy for you to bring so many other people on board and to have a really cohesive action. And just as I conclude, one thing I want to observe is that in this particular COP, we have seen deliberate attempt at bringing all voices on board. We even have a faith pavilion at COP28, with a recognition that religious leaders play a critical role in shaping opinion. They hold so many masses in shaping opinion and driving that action from that point of, intergenerational dialogue and bringing all this conversation to the fore. So I think it's a matter of decentralizing this conversation, drawing a clear correlation between the science and how it affects our daily lives. Then the conversation is no longer about just a technical, fictional concept, but something that affects our daily lives.
Okay. And Mercy, and forgive my getting into the technical aspects of it, the world is looking to achieve net zero by 2050. But many people are saying that even the reduction of using fossil fuels, there's no evidence that it will help the world accelerate achieving a net zero capacity. How should this transition look like for MSMEs, the ones you're representing? How should this transition look like?
I mean, with any change, it doesn't happen automatically. And also we have to recognize that we cannot just abandon the use of fossil fuels and pick up green, and renewable fuels. But the idea is to have a clear roadmap or a framework to allow transition to happen. So for example, for companies that are heavily exploiting the resources within the communities, that leaves the area dilapidated. And that's why we're having so many areas of, so many cases of floods, and and floods comes up with different communicable diseases and many other consequences that come from there. What they try to do is to rehabilitate parts of it, or they try to provide different incentives to the communities to actually cushion them from all these adverse effects of them exploiting the resources. So how we come in, even as a network, and actually KCIC is one of the members of the ASEC network, is that we help entrepreneurs to actually come up with a more sustainable approach to sourcing of raw materials from the environment without necessarily depleting it. Because again, remember, we have to play the long-term game. Yes, I can produce this product by exploiting, like cutting down all the trees in the area, but what happens 10 years after? What are you saying? That we have to now move to another country because we lack resources within our own country because of mismanagement. So what we try to do is really advise these SMEs and the startups to come up with best practices to source the environment, to source materials, to produce it in a more efficient manner, and also be able to integrate technology to actually track the usage. So for example, at COP28, they're going to be launching the Green Performance Toolkit that has been developed by the International Trade Center. And it's actually a free online tool that SMEs can use to actually help them track the efficiency of how they are using their own resources. That is very important because now they're able to see how they can, one, budget in their own businesses on how they can source materials in the right manner. The second thing also is looking at how they can set up their systems and processes to ensure that they are compliant alongside the ESG principles, so the environmental, social, and governance principles, to ensure that even for them, they also have a plan of sustainability beyond that. And alongside that is looking at how we can support these SMEs and startups access financing, because some of the enablers within our network, they play two roles. They play one, the role of an investor. At the same time, also they build capacity for these SMEs and startups to absorb the capital so that they can embed these green principles within their own businesses. Okay. So it's a different mix of interventions that we're doing, but really the goal is to ensure that it's a transition period, and to also help them access the financing to help them build their capacity to do that. Okay. If you look at, for example, some of the members within the network, they've been able to support more than 1,000 entrepreneurs in different sectors, build business models that can, one, help them scale up. And that is a good thing because now we're talking about job creation within the different communities. At the same time, also looking at how do we increase Kenya's competitiveness to attract investment into the country. So we're not just talking about pledges that are happening at COP, but we're talking about real impact investment coming into the country. If you look at the data, we had more than $1.1 billion that came into the country to fund these startups that are accelerating the growth. And it's all because of the work that our members are doing in providing training, providing coaching, linking them to their professional service providers that can help them build the right systems and processes in place, looking at their marketing strategy, looking at their branding, how are they communicating to their partners in that. And also alongside that is bringing together a community of different entrepreneurs that they can benchmark from each other and even trade amongst each other to leverage the network for trade. I'll
come to each and every one of you for 2 minutes parting short on this, and I'll start with you, Tarus, and right after this you can just log out because I know you're still at the center and you have an early morning engagement tomorrow. So where do we go from here? Where will the focus be? I know after COP28, then what happens? Back here at home, I know you're running a campaign for 15 billion trees in 10 years. You're calling it Jazamiti. Is that where the focus will be going forward?
Thank you very much, Trevor, for the opportunity to have my closing remarks. You're right, of course, from here, we are doing quite a number of actions to ensure that what we agreed as part of our SCS declaration find its space within the bigger decision that we are expecting next week. But of course, part of what we are doing here also is to talk to our partners, to talk to quite a number of other actors to be able to work with us in our ambitious program to regreen and be able to transform our landscape by 30% increase of trees by the year 2032. And part of what we were able to do today was to have a side event together with other development partners for us to share with them our vision, our thinking, and more so be able to give them a clarity call that our eyes are focused. We are set to be able to see that we plant 1 tree, we plant 2 trees, we plant 1.5 in year 1. And hopefully by the year 2032, we should have well above 15 billion trees in the landscape. And the feedback we got is that Kenya has what it takes to be able to go there. And so far, we are seeing a lot of positive energy around the idea. We would be coming back home more so to be able to continue the good work that we started early this year and be able to ideally track every tree that we're planting. So my rallying call this evening, yes, we are still discussing and engaging ourselves in this very high global agenda of climate change. But part of what we need to do as a country, and part of what we need to do at a personal level, be able to manage and address the effects of climate change, is to continue planting trees. So let's take advantage of the long El Nino season to be able to put more trees on the landscape. And more importantly, also be able to record. We have a monitoring tool called Jazamiti that is available at Google Play Store and App Store. If you're able to download that app, it will give you the species of the trees that you should be able to plant within any parts of our country, so that by and large, we put our lands into trees. But as part of the bigger thinking is we are also deliberating how best can we be able to build value chains that make those actions beneficial at a personal level. Be they fruit trees, because one of the strategies is we need to at least ensure that the trees we are growing, 30% of it is fruit trees. And that will speak to the passionate topic that my co-panelist Jennifer has been talking about, the issue of the children in schools, the youth, because they are critical element of our bigger society. And part of what the 15 billion is trying to do is to ensure that they have a nutritious food supply at the early stages. And so in a nutshell, Trevor, that's the outlook of things. Yep. But we are keeping our eyes on the ball here, and we are hopeful that by the end of next week, we should be able to come home with enhanced bags of goodies to continue our bigger plans and actions. Thank you.
Thank you, Tarus. I'll allow you to log out because I know it's almost 1 a.m. in Dubai and you have another session tomorrow in the morning. Thank you so much for making time for us, Tarus. That's George Tarus, Acting Conservation Secretary, State Department of Forestry, speaking to us from Dubai. Jennifer, your closing remarks now.
So for us, the next step is to be able to build the capacity of children to be actors in the climate action session right now. We are training children. Our aim in the next year, we want to be able to train over 10,000 children from about 6 counties in Kenya. And this is starting this week and next week, training children to be able to be action, to be able to look for solutions, and to be able to scale up some of these solutions by children to be able to make a difference. So those are some of the things that at Mtoto we are hoping to be able to do, and also simplify this jargon into child-friendly language, okay, through a children climate dictionary and some other child-friendly materials, like be able to simplify the COP28. How are we going to hold a government and world leaders accountable as children? Is to be able to simplify the declaration that is going to come out next week from Dubai into child-friendly language, so that children can be able to say, you said this, what have you been able to do it? So before we go to COP29. So for us, those are some of the things. And also we are partnering with Mama Doing Good to do an essay competition. So children, look it out for that. So we are doing an essay competition just to be able to help children give us those solutions on climate change. What are we able to do as children? Because as children have amazing solutions. I believe in children have amazing solutions that can be able to change the trajectory of climate change. Okay. Thank you so much.
Tobias, closing remarks.
Thank you, Trevor. Now, a lot of criticism on COPs has been that it's all talk and no action. While that is not entirely true, there needs to be more decisive action, and we need to see leaders, organizations, and stakeholders walking the talk on the conversations that they have at COP. And it is my hope that going forward after 12th of this month, we are going to see really action being taken by different actors in the ecosystem. Having said that, I think there is a critical need to move the climate conversation from fear-mongering and blame game to actual cohesive and collaborative effort to get a solution together. We have seen images of hell and images of the devil as, graphic and red and all that, but it has not stopped people from sinning, Trevor. And that tells you human beings are not entirely rational. We know smoking is bad, but even some medics smoke. So the fear-mongering around climate and showing the world as burning has not worked. for centuries. It hasn't worked. We have to move that conversation and shift it to one where we seek solutions together. And that's why even Africa as a continent is shifting the conversation from blaming the West to coming to the table, not with a moralist argument, but with a collaborative mindset. So we need to shift that conversation and seek solutions together and really let each and every party play their part in reaching that ultimate solution, because our future depends on it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mercy, closing remarks?
Well, there's a lot to say, but in summary, looking at all the high-level discussions, and even Tarus mentioned the closed-door meetings and deal rooms happening, we need to devolve that high-level discussion down to the national discussion, and then also down to the counties, down to the sub-counties, and down to the wards. And so this is an invitation to the government that we are also able, as ASEC, as a network, to be able to convene those different dialogues and really demystify all those terminologies and really come up with concrete actions that we can see moving forward. We've always been convening different public participation dialogues. We have different barazas where we invite academias, we have corporates who come in, we have the civil society, we have the entrepreneur support organizations, we have the startups and SMEs, and also, of course, we have government within that room. So it's important to have a multi-stakeholder discussion to really break down all those different commitments and then come up with an actual implementation plan to see that through. I really want us to, when we went to COP29, we actually bring a framework or a case study and say, this is what Kenya has done into doing that. Alongside that also is looking at how we can have a policy. So we do not need to wait for protocols to be discussed at that global level. Even us as a country, we have the sovereign duty to develop policies at our own level. One of the key things that we've been championing since 2018 is the Startup Bill. The Startup Bill was actually supposed to create a framework to encourage more young businesses and even innovative business models to come forth and then access financing, both at the government level and even local financing from angel investors and even international investors coming in. But alongside that was also to look at how we can entrench all these services within the national innovation ecosystem to ensure that even as we are developing all these protocols and going for all these fantastic global meetings, we are still bringing back all the programming, all the financing and all that tech transfer back into the local community. So really anchoring it in policy and also engaging in public participation dialogues to ensure inclusivity of voices in that agenda.
All right. Thank you so much for making time this evening. George Tarus, Acting Conservation Secretary, State Department of Forestry, was joining us from Dubai. Jennifer Kaberi, Founder and CEO Mtoto News. Tobias Bele, Communication and Knowledge Management Lead at KCIC. And Mercy Kimalat, CEO, Association of Startup and SMEs Enablers of Kenya. Thank you all for tuning in to this conversation. We'll keep track of what's going on in COP28 and bring up the resolutions, and we'll discuss them even further at that particular point. On behalf of everybody else who made this possible, my name is Trevor Mbija. We say good night and God bless.